And now we welcome our guest, Eoin McNamara, Finnish Institute of International Affairs. Thank you very much for joining us on TVP World. So we have a bit of a summit before the big summit that everyone is waiting for in the summer. And the big digits of this summit appear to be $100 billion for Ukraine. Rather than asking you, is it realistic to get this money together, I'd like to ask you, is it going to be a bit too late? I've heard critics say that it's great to bring this money together, but Ukraine really needs it right now, like right now, this week, next week. What do you think?
Well, timing is everything in war. At times, the West has been a bit too late in its support for Ukraine. I think we saw that last spring where the Leopards came on stream a little bit too late for the counteroffensive, and we maybe have seen it as well with the F-16. But still, better late than never, I would say, as the old saying goes. Ukrainians are still standing up. They are still fighting. They are still determined to defend their country and to drive the Russians out for a fair and just peace. So, yes, this money can still make a significant difference to Ukraine, and it can lift morale and help Ukraine get momentum back, because it's been a tough winter.
Right. I'm going to ask you something about something that Jens Stoltenberg said the other day. Talking about Russian military targets outside Ukraine, in line with international law, that Ukraine has the right to strike them. Now, we just saw Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Paris say that the U.S. neither supported nor supports nor enabled Ukraine to strike targets within Russia. How do you explain that big discrepancy between the largest contributor to NATO and the NATO Secretary General?
Well, of course, I mean, from the U.S. side, the U.S. is a great power. It is a superpower. It is a nuclear power. It has very large responsibilities for the nuclear chain of escalation and to try and calm global nuclear tensions in the world. So the United States tends to look at matters through this lens. And of course, if military installations or other installations that support Russia's aggression in Ukraine are targeted, or sorry, not in Ukraine, in Russia, are targeted by Ukraine, and Russia seeks to kind of get into hysteria by saying, oh, you know, these attacks were enabled by weapon systems given by the West, then the United States is fearful that we might climb that chain of nuclear escalation and a spiral of deteriorating security might ensue. So that really is what is informing U.S. caution right now.
There is also a sense that now there is a move towards a lot less reliance on the U.S. in terms of military support for Ukraine. It may not be said outrightly. Would you agree that that is the case, especially in advance of the elections in November?
That seems to be the case right now. The big military aid package for Ukraine hasn't got through the Congress as yet. Negotiations are ongoing. And yes, the gauntlet really has been thrown down to the Europeans to support Ukraine as best they can. But of course, there's a lot of military technologies, a lot of advanced military technologies that the United States has, say, ATACMS systems, for instance, that Europeans don't have at the same capacity or at the same volume. So without, augmented European help is certainly a boost for Ukraine, but without the United States fully involved, without that military aid package passing through the Congress and going to Ukraine, then the Western support for Ukraine, cumulative Western support from Ukraine, is definitely weaker. We need the United States on board.
Right. We also see somewhat of a discrepancy, or at least, I mean, I don't know, we cover this on a daily basis, so we're constantly seeing the kind of this discrepancy between political rhetoric and actual actions. And that being said, if the U.S. doesn't get on board here in a significant way, even if the Biden administration itself doesn't step up above and beyond what it's already provided, there is room for Russia to achieve certain goals in Ukraine, and that leaves Europe, for instance, Poland, the Baltics, in a precarious situation. I'm wondering, from the Finnish perspective, is that a concern for the government, for defense experts in Finland, that Finland itself could face perhaps some Russian aggression if there is success on the battlefield in Ukraine from the Russian side?
It's certainly a concern for Finland, for Sweden, in the neighboring Baltic states as well. And that has been signaled in all of these states. It has been signaled to the people, but by their national governments, that we need to be ready, that the situation in Europe is changing, and in a way that we haven't experienced for decades. I think that was true in the Prime Minister of Poland's statement a number of days ago, where he said, you know, this might be devastating for younger generations, but we're now possibly in a pre-war era. So these concerns are about, and they're being communicated very openly. And yes, if Russia is allowed to prevail in Ukraine or to strengthen its position in Ukraine, I think Putin has proven himself to be quite a providential leader, in the sense that he's very aware of different landmarks in history. He likes revenge, and the Russians often play on this myth that NATO enlargement was made possible because of Russia's weakness. During the 1990s, Russia was too weak to push back. Putin would probably like to redress that, and by redressing that, by challenging the rigor of NATO's Article 5. So as long as the deterrence and the military support behind Article 5 remains strong, I would be confident that the EU and NATO can deter Russia. But of course, the specter of Donald Trump and his possible re-election as President of the United States, that creates quite an element of uncertainty that is creating some nervousness in the region, in Central and Eastern Europe, in the Baltic states right now.
Certainly.
Absolutely, and we've even had some signals coming out of the Kremlin that Russia and NATO are now in direct confrontation. Anyway, thank you very much, Eoin McNamara of the Finnish Institute of International Affairs. Thank you very much for joining us on TVP World.
Thank you.